Hello and welcome to all the men and women of the West. I'm Joe, here with me is my co-host Dan.
Hello and greetings.
And today's Warcraft video is going to be of a different sort from the last ones. It's going to be included in the same playlist, but here we're going to be kind of looking at a character. Well, we made a bit of a small semi-mistake when discussing Orgrim Doomhammer in the last video. Namely, we listed him as Blackrock, but apparently he belonged to also the clan of the Thunderlords. Now, he had possibly one parent who was a Blackrock, one who was a Thunderlord, and belonged to both tribes, because he seems to have had some sort of connection to both. But Orcish tribes are typically, you become a member by biologically connected in some capacity to it. We also want to kind of just quickly examine him up to the point of the First War. Doomhammer apparently grew up a little interested in the Draenei and getting into trouble with Durotan, the two kids basically growing up alongside each other because the tribes didn't seem to be too conflicted against one another. In the original lore, it seems that Doomhammer originally wanted the hammer, which apparently brings doom to those who wield it in some capacity. Apparently there's a prophecy about last wielder it's going to have, his line will end because of the hammer or something like that. And it's not exactly clear, and I don't think even Blizzard or Medicine really quite made their mind up about it, as the entire prophecy is dropped because the last real wielder would have been Thrall, which would have meant his line ending because of the Doomhammer. But that does not take place. This plot point is basically worthless and doesn't result in anything. Maybe we're supposed to think this is what happens to Doomhammer, but bear in mind he passes it on to Thrall. So Thrall would be the final wielder, which means this thing's destined to destroy him and his kids.
Yeah.
The elemental spirits that got their mitts on this thing wanted to banish it. Doomhammer fought to claim it, and Blackhand backed him up, and they managed to reclaim it. The idea is that Blackhand was to put his hands on it and then give it over to Orgrim Doomhammer. So maybe the prophecy's technically referring to Blackhand, because technically he was the wielder for a few minutes. With my suspicion being, if that's the case, maybe Orgrim Doomhammer kind of played him. If the curse is going to be passed on to someone, why let it be passed on to you when you can convince the guy you hate to put his hands on it and give it to you and accept the curse onto himself?
That's a fair point.
Because Blackhand in the original lore is not a terribly intimidating or powerful guy. He's actually kind of puny as far as orcs go, especially in comparison to Orgrim Doomhammer's just the man. As to Doomhammer, he seems to have been pretty well connected. He had connections with Durotan, he had connections with Blackhand serving as his right-hand man before the beginning of the wars. Essentially, he had his nest well feathered, so that's worth wondering how much did he plan, how much did he do to just kind of set himself up as the new war chief.
Yes, because sure there were some events that he probably didn't control. I mean, we're dealing with Gul'dan here.
Yeah, Gul'dan's a fairly random character who just wants to watch the world burn, because he's a servant of the Burning Legion.
And Blackhand was essentially his front man.
Doomhammer involved in the kind of war or conflict with the Draenei, and Orgrim apparently didn't approve of this war or conflict, but he participated in it. I suspect he was kind of doing a bit of the Roy Mustang thing, gathering evidence as he goes, gathering resources and connections as he goes, building his way up to the top and building his authority and his position, bolstering his authority within the Horde in preparation for the day he would usurp Blackhand and Gul'dan.
Getting popular with the common folk.
I think that he was getting popular with those who approved of the conquest, because the orcs are conquering warlike people. On the other hand, there were probably those who didn't like Gul'dan and Blackhand. And somehow he was able to slip around at one point, drinking the blood of Manoroth, tricking Gul'dan and Blackhand into approving of this by telling them he was not worthy of drinking it. He was but their servant, their slave. He was able to suck up enough. The difference between Orgrim Doomhammer and Durotan and even Thrall is that Doomhammer is incredibly charming and charismatic. At every point in the story, it seems like, at least in the original lore, he steps forward, he talks, everybody listens to him. Everybody wants to listen to him. Everybody just looks in his direction. They don't look to Blackhand and Gul'dan, they look to him. He's charismatic. Durotan could not inspire loyalty enough to pull off a coup against Gul'dan and Blackhand in the middle of the war, because he's a simple guy, sure, and that's charming in its own way. I would argue Durotan was not an extraordinary person. He was too mundane, too unambitious, almost shy, it seems, from what I saw of the movie. He does not seem to have expanded his sphere of influence outside of his clan, the Frostwolves. He was confined to them. Whatever authority or position he had was because of Orgrim Doomhammer Doomhammer. In marked contrast to the movie, it seems like Orgrim Doomhammer was the commander between the two, and Durotan was probably the follower. And Durotan does not strike me as being much of a leader. He doesn't strike me as being interested in it.
He seemed like the type that,
He'd be content with just, I don't know, being a barber or something.
yeah, the white picket fence, just him and his wife and his kids. He just wants to be left alone and not worry about the entire matter of the war.
Yeah, he was remarkably peaceful and passive for an orc, which, I mean, no offense, but this would not have inspired confidence or much affection amongst the orcs, because they are a warlike people, and I'd even argue in Stormwind it would have inspired contempt, because the Stormwindians, whether you like it or not, even the Lordoranians are warlike. These are militant societies. These are strong civilizations. They aren't going to respect you if you're a chieftain or a noble, and all you want to do is basically be a farmer or a peasant. In this kind of extremely warrior militant society, you're not going to inspire respect or affection by not wanting conflict and avoiding it. Conflict avoidance is fine in some civilizations eventually, but it's something of an irritant to more down to basics civilization. We got to bear in mind we almost have a Howardian Cimmerian society with the orcs. But that said, he serves the role of the barbarian archetype in a way. Doomhammer and Durotan, I think, had different visions for the orcs. Doomhammer did not wish to weaken their warrior traditions. He seems to have clung to them, but he wanted them to direct their energies in a more positive manner. He doesn't seem to have liked the Burning Legion. Why fight for the glory of demons and destruction for no reason when you can fight for, the glory of the orc people and the horde? Durotan, they immediately kind of clued in that he might be a possible traitor. Durotan was honest, but he was also not very bright. The difference between Durotan, Doomhammer, is almost comparable, I would argue, to the difference between Robert the Bruce. I want to say William Wallace, but William Wallace was infinitely more talented than Durotan. But I guess you could say Philippe VI de Valois. Philippe Capet Valois was the sixth Philippe to occupy the French throne. He was the one who kickstarted by accident, yes, by accident, the 100 Years' War, attacking the political position of Edward III, which there were valid reasons for why he was doing that. Edward was attacking his legitimacy as king in turn, whereas Robert the Bruce initially tried to use, yes, open combat, but then he also tried to throw in some manipulation, some stealth, some guerrilla tactics, some political machinations, and even the papacy in order to outmaneuver Edward the First and then later the Second. Doomhammer has that cunning.
He's a pragmatist.
Yeah.
He gets results, and that's what the orcs wanted.
Maybe not look at everything as being part of his plan, because the notion of a perfect, flawless master plan that you can cook up for 10 years or how many years without changing a single beat of it is dumb. It involves an inflexibility, when in reality, the kind of brains Doomhammer would utilize, he was not omniscient. He didn't know half the time what Blackhand or Gul'dan would do. Well, he probably knew what Blackhand would do. Blackhand was spineless. Towards the end of the wars, Gul'dan screws him over and has to retreat and fight Gul'dan and take him down. The trouble is, Anduin Lothar is in pursuit along with his deputy. Doomhammer, at the start of the war, is pretty much deputy war chief, and he has worked long and hard to claim this office.
He knew what his goal was. He had to learn to adapt in order to reach that goal.
If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to smash that like and that subscribe button as though you were Doomhammer smashing Blackhand into the pavement.